Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show. My name is Shane Brennan. I'm joined by Brian O'Leary as we react to the first two games of the Divisional round as both the top seeds managed to get through their respective battles. We're going to talk about how the Seattle Seahawks completely demolished the San Francisco 49ers later on. But let's talk about the more interesting game, the one that went to overtime. That ended up being a 3-point victory for the Denver Broncos, Brian. Broncos coming out 33-30 victors here against the Buffalo Bills. And there's a lot of fallout coming out from this. Sean McDermott is coming out from this saying he's very unhappy with a particular call made in overtime when an interception was called after a play downfield that wasn't really given a lot of time. There's a lot of things going on here. I think the main tail of the tape here is two things. Firstly, the Bills gave up a lot of turnovers here. And whenever they played well, they played really, really well. But whenever they gave up a lot of turnovers, the Bills punish them, or the Broncos punish them. And they got 13 points in the opening half based purely on turnovers, including a bizarre decision to somehow go for a Hail Mary attempt at the end of the first half. But once the Bills were clean, then they were able to get a lot done. The Broncos didn't seem like they were creating enough. But Broncos fans, look, we said this time and time again, they'll turn around and say, look, we managed to put up 30 points. We punished them when we needed to punish them, and we got the job done. They're going to have to go into the AFC Championship game next week without Bo Nix's quarterback. The news is he's going in with a broken ankle. But in terms of a team performance, I think they will be confident they'll be able to beat whoever comes in, whether it's Houston or New England.
Shane, this game for me is marred by, first of all, it was a fantastic game. Sorry, don't want to get away from that. Like, if anybody watching the game on Saturday night at 9:30 Irish time, they were spoiled by a game that had so many different storylines. Like, you were trying to pick out a number to even before we kick off. It's difficult. It's difficult. There were so many points. From a Bills fan's perspective this morning, and I've had a few text me to say, yet again, in big moments, we managed to find ways to lose the game. And initially I was kind of going, that's a bit of a disservice to the Broncos. The Broncos were well in the game throughout the course of the game. The Broncos drove down and got that Mims touchdown at the end, which looked like could be the game winner, only for the Bills to drive down and get that last second field goal to put the game into overtime. But upon reflection, you think about certain key aspects of the game in moments, like you just referred to it there. Before halftime, it looks like it's going to go 10-10 at halftime, potentially even 13-10 with a field goal. Instead, Bills secondary goes soft, zone coverage, which gives some chunk plays to the Broncos. And in fairness, Tony Romo called it, on second down. He said, look, at this stage, you should go for it and, try to exploit the end zone because you've nothing to lose. You're in field goal range to get the touchdown. And you just refer to it there. Most teams would say, you know what, we're down by a touchdown in the divisional round game on the road. It's not a big deal. We've got the ball at the start of the second half. Let's go in at halftime, take a knee. Instead, they tried to rally, thinking they could get into field goal range. Josh Allen, inexplicit fumble, ball bounces back 10-15 yards into field goal range, and then all of a sudden it's a 10-point game. Immediately, second half, fumble, 13-point lead for the Broncos. You're starting to think this game is getting away from the Bills because, and even that situation, like even they referred to it in the commentary, it was only actually so a little period of play within the clock of the game, and quickly how things evolved. And yet the Bills come back. And then we got all these different aspects towards the back end of the game in terms of whether flags were flags and flags that weren't flags. The Bills are up by 1 point, they're driving. Looks like they might take an 8-point lead. They have to set up for field goal, which is kind of questionable calls whether a flag should have been in the end zone on a Bills wide receiver. It's a difficult one for Bills fans yet again. It just feels like they're here again, and Sean McDermott's answering questions after the game about certain aspects of how they managed the game. The Bills seem to just have this knack of not finding the way to get over the line. I know they've been to championship games, but this is again another year in which we spoke about where I felt like this was a huge opportunity for Josh Allen and Co. And yet again, they've come out the wrong side of it.
Yeah, I was saying, you probably tell my intro, you were saying how difficult it was to try to figure what the story of the game was because there's so many different aspects to it. I mean, the Broncos had no run game to speak of. Their pass game was clinical in some key moments, a really nice play call in the first half when they got what was it, the touchdown to bring them 17-10 up with some really nice offensive stuff. But then on the other side of things, I think Buffalo were the ones that were actually controlling the game, and that their fumbles, they had 3 fumbles and 2 interceptions, were the ones that were costly, and Denver just sort of, punished whenever needed to be punished, but they didn't necessarily create anything by themselves. But there's a couple of key calls here. I mean, look, the one that Sean McDermott talked about at the end when in overtime, pass goes up to goes deep.
Brandon Cooks.
The Brandon Cooks. And as he comes down with it, he kind of, as he rolls over and is on his back, it gets picked off by McMillan at the Denver 20 and comes back. Now, there's two sides to McDermott's. McDermott's been out in the press last night saying he's defending Buffalo, god damn it. And there's two sides to that. Firstly, the referees seem very, very quick to move on from it. Because you can't throw a coach challenge in overtime. They seem very, very quick to say, yeah, that's it. We're not even going to check it. Which I agree with him on. Like, that game should have been, that play should have been given the respect, considering the situation it was, 30 points to 30 overtime and all this, just to make sure. But I think personally that the ruling was correct, or certainly that there wasn't enough in the replay to overturn it. Now, look at there's two other things from that. The people will always focus on that, but there's two other things I think that's going against Josh Allen. People will come out and talk about Josh Allen not being able to get it done. Firstly, look at who he's passing to. Like, Cook should have been able to hold on to that property. A lot of teams have wide receivers who can. The play beforehand, there was a pass going to McCall Hardman, which any receiver worth his salt would have caught, and he drops it. And you're like, Jesus, the Bills just can't just make hay when they have momentum. And thirdly, there was a player in the first half, I think, during a drive when had they scored a touchdown, there would have been 2 scores up as opposed to just being a field goal up. And there was an incompletion to the right-hand side to Khalil Shakir on a 3rd and 8. It ended up being a field goal afterwards, which I think was a pass interference call. I think a couple of yards outside of the end zone. That should have gone Buffalo's way, and it didn't. And there's a couple of those very, very small little things that just in a tight game like this matters a lot. And, you know, again, my hottest take of the year that I keep getting proven wrong on is Bills. The Broncos are frauds. The Broncos are frauds, and I'm not trying to take away too much from their performance here, but the Broncos defense didn't play stellar football here. The Broncos offense didn't play stellar football here. But the moments just seem to go their way, and I can understand why a lot of Bills Mafia are waking up this morning just feeling very, very frustrated with how that game ended.
Yeah, like I picked the Broncos. I just felt to be on the right side of it. I'm not trying to wax lyrical. It was always going to be one of those games that you could easily have gone the other way. I just felt the Broncos in the critical moments. Who do I trust more as a coach? I trust Sean Payton more, and even in the overtime where the controversial play, which you discussed there, they still had to start at the 20-yard line. So the guy made the point in our group last night was they're suggesting when in the rights and wrongs of the play, it wasn't a bad play call because if it was picked off, they were going to be punting on the next play anyway. So where's the punt realistically going to land? It's going to land in that general area. So essentially, it was like a punt play, but yet then they still have to drive down the field. But within that particular drive, that's where it really irked me because there was 2 flags put on the Bills secondary, which I felt were soft. Like they went for one, the crowd were antagonized that they didn't get it, and they literally went back on the exact same play, and then it was called immediately. Now, I don't know where the rest look at that and go, we should have got the first time round, we'll definitely get it the next time round. There was also roughing the passer on that play, so I guess you could say it's all irrelevant because they would have got that one. But the one at the end, where people said, "No, he didn't turn his head around," I didn't think he did enough on his body to warrant a flag. But in saying that, Harvey had a big play on that driver. It would have been a huge third down play coming, and instead he goes for 25 yards and look allowed to the Broncos to drive. Again, you're just talking about critical moments. I'll throw another one in there. I think people are forgetting that was the Bills were continuously turning the ball over during the course of the game. There's 2 critical moments. They were 7-3 up on their drive, and they were literally about to go into the red zone and Cook fumbles. At that stage, you go up 2 scores, you might take the air out of the stadium, and you could essentially, I wouldn't say you're going to walk away with victory, but you certainly put yourself in a huge position. And then having turned over the Broncos in the 3rd quarter, when the momentum of the game had completely swung in their favour, they had established the run game throughout the course of the game. And this was and I've said it all year long, you've heard me bang on about Cook as one of the leading running backs in the league, but because he has this turnover issue, it's like they have a reluctance to trust on him continuously. He's had 6 in the regular season, he had 1 last night, and it's like to say, we know he's really good and effective, but we don't want to put the body the weight on him, and that's why we're not going to continuously run the ball. In that situation, having just intercepted, go to your run game, rely on your run game. Worst case scenario, you walk away with a field goal off a turnover. Instead, they went for the the home run shot immediately, and then he was intercepted. Within two plays of that interception by the Bills defense, the Broncos had the ball back. That was another lost opportunity. And these little key critical moments in games. And Sean McDermott, I'm not going to say he's deflecting, but yeah, he's right in his own mind to talk about what happened at the end. But for Bills fans, they have to look at huge moments over the course of the game that essentially allowed the Broncos to stay in the game. And even at the end as well, you're giving the touchdown which they gave away to allow them to go up by 3 points. I mean, you're asking your defense, who stood up for 2.5 quarters, to make a stop, to find a way to put yourself in a position. It can't always be on Josh Allen. Josh Allen is fantastic. He did another great game. Yeah, he's throwing interceptions, but like, part of him has to be saying, guys, give me a bit of a dig out here. You know what I mean? This is time and time again we put ourselves in a position to win games, and our defense can't get out the field. It's hugely frustrating. I think the biggest storyline for the Broncos, and you alluded to very early on, is things have evolved overnight. Like, for those who went to bed after a very comprehensive Seahawks victory or halfway through the game acknowledged this game is over, may not have seen the news until this morning that Bo Nix is now out for next week, which completely changes the landscape of this championship game. Where I said to you during the week, if the Broncos win, I don't think either of the teams playing tonight will go in there and win. Changes the whole dynamic now. All of a sudden, you've got a situation where a backup quarterback's going to play in an AFC championship game. Can he deal with the magnitude of what's ahead of him? Can Sean Payton get ready in his own mindset mentally to be ready to play against either a really strong Patriots defense or potentially the Texans defense? It's a huge conversation for the week ahead.
Absolutely huge as well. And look, I think the fact that the Broncos don't really have much of a run game to speak of, but that might have to change. Look, Sean Payton has over a week now to plan for that, depending on who they're playing against between the Patriots and the Texans. Whether it is the Patriots or the Texans, we will know tonight. For anybody who's listening to us, from 8 o'clock onwards, we're doing a live watch along in Graco Studios to the matchup between the Texans and the Patriots. Make sure you join us on the Irish NFL Show YouTube channel. Let's go to the NFC side of things. I have a funny feeling we won't be talking about this game quite as much because this story was written pretty much from the first play, because the final score here was 41-6 in favor of the Seattle Seahawks. And look, I changed my mind quite late in the week. I was on the AV Club during the week. I said Seahawks would win. As much as we were always looking at this Niners team and saying, well, hey, eventually they're going to have one injury too many. I wondered whether there might be something in either the Sam Darnold injury or there's something in just the way that how good Kyle Shanahan coached his team that might be able to inspire something. But the second I turned on the feed here and I heard the crowd in Seattle, I was like, no, this is not happening for San Francisco. And sure enough, it wasn't. Raheem Shaheed runs back the touchdown on the first play. In the second drive, when the Niners have the ball, it's a turnover and downs. A poorly called timeout, I think, was part of that issue there. But it means that the Seahawks get the ball back again. There's a fumble when the Niners get the ball back in their second drive, and then afterwards they go back and get a touchdown. And by the end of the first quarter, it's 17-0. And look, I turned it off at that point, and I said, look, I'll watch the rest on the recap in the morning. But one of the things that I really liked about this is we talk so much about how great the Seattle defense is. The Seattle offense not only was strong, but I think was able to improvise and use other parts of their weaponry a lot better here. It's funny how in the Denver game, I was rare these halftime sort of sideline reporters going up to the managers actually got a good line. And they went with this to Sean Payton. He was like, look, the bye week doesn't count in the first half. The bye week, the rest counts in the second half. And I was like, okay, well, then the further we go on here, that this bye week energy is going to keep building and building for Seattle, and we saw this. But I really liked how well they used Walker. He got 3 touchdowns on the night. A really, really smart one where the play design was for him to go to the right, but he saw the gap on the left and just took it. They used Cooper Kupp more often. They only had one completed pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first half. Only one. Because they were able to use Cooper Kupp. They were able to use Raheem Shaheed in a couple of sort of run plays and pass plays as well. Great pickup he's turned out to be from the Saints during the year. And look, whoever wins between the Rams and the Bears tonight, I don't think will want to go in Seattle, not only because of that everything about this team seems to be playing at a very, very high level, but that atmosphere it really is a 12th man.
Well, selfishly, Shane, the Bears fans won't be impressed with me saying this. I really want a rematch of that Thursday night game, which we saw, week 14, week 15, in which the Seahawks came at the right side of it in overtime, and they went for the 2-point conversion, because that was like a fantastic game. And anybody who would, I think most of us would sign up for that game now as it's the NFC Championship game next week. Obviously, Bears fans will have something to say about that, and they obviously got the Rams to play tonight late at 11:30. Look, I was probably completely opposed to what you suggested during the week, Shane, in terms of this could be a story now. We're trying to navigate to victory. I said on the show on Thursday night, I felt this was a blowout spot coming because I just felt this is it for the 49ers. They're injury ravaged. They had I wouldn't say a miraculous victory last weekend, but they did so well just to hold in the game against the Eagles, who are just not the same level as they were last year. But going in there, having only played each other 2 weeks ago, there's still enough footage from that game. And no matter that game 2 weeks ago in Santa Clara, how dominant they were to shut down Brock Purdy, I just felt the 49ers didn't have enough time to find a way to kind of scheme against that same scenario again, and kind of that was evident in the game. Turnover, as you said, they stopped them on the fourth down. There was numerous turnovers. Fairness to Brock Purdy, he had some nice plays during the game. I mean, he did his utmost to keep them in the game, but it was just too big a task. And it's a bit weird because if Ben probably called this out at the start of the season, the run game for the Seahawks was really effective. Then it kind of had a little bit of a lull during the season. And Charbonnet, in particular Walker, now Charbonnet kind of stepped into the role as essentially as maybe the one running back. But Walker, over the course of the last few weeks, and again, in particular that game in Santa Clara, he kind of had a really stellar game. And it was really evident last night that he's back playing at the level in which we saw last season and early on in the season. Like 3 touchdowns last night. And it just feels like this Seahawks team, we look at it every year, they have that Eagles feel of it last year where they just seem to be primed and coming into form at just at the right time. And all the conversations around Sam Darnold having an injury, but like even prior to that, I said, hold on, it's not a game that Sam Darnold's going to go out and have to throw over 300 yards and numerous touchdowns. They were just going to, their defense themselves can put themselves in a position where they just have to be methodical on offense. And that was probably Cook's best game for the Seahawks. I mean, not necessarily because he didn't score a touchdown, but like his receptions, the number of receptions he had, the yards, it was like as if like they're going to try to shut down Smith and JB, but we do have other players that can allow us to flourish offensively. So it was a comprehensive victory, and they sit down now and look at this tonight, and everybody who looks at this will probably assume it's a foregone conclusion that whoever goes into Seattle next week will get beaten because it's just too big an ask, and he touched on the crowd, and it very much feels like the old days of the Legion of Boom. But the Rams will feel like they owe the Seahawks one. And look, this Bears story is compelling in itself. So whatever NFC Championship game we get next Sunday night will be a great one.
There's no such thing as a sure thing in the NFL. Well, have we not learned this by now? You know, there's no such thing. I mean, the only thing I do feel sure about it, even if the 49ers had a lot more fit players, I still think the Seahawks just came out in such a rapturous thunder that they would have just completely manhandled them all. Like they were just such a physical team. But I don't know. We'll see what happens to the Rams Bears before it's out looking ahead. But for now, that's everything from the Irish NFL Show. Thank you very much for listening to our Instant Reaction podcast. Like I was saying, we are live in studio watching the Texans and the Patriots. And after that game, there will also be an Instant Reaction podcast on your feed. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you keep tuned with the Irish NFL Show.